This is part 5 of the second lecture for Module 8 in the Apologia General Science book. In the last part, we concluded looking at the problems with uniformitarianism, and now we're going to look at some of the problems with catastrophism. The first problem that Dr. Weil points out is that there is no good explanation for the existence of unconformities that exist between rock layers laid down by the flood. Most catastrophists believe that the Grand Canyon, for example, was laid down during the flood. But it's hard to explain how come between some of these layers of rock in the Grand Canyon we have these unconformities, these surfaces of erosion between layers of rock. How could that have occurred? Unconformities require erosion, and erosion takes time, and there was not a lot of time during the flood for this erosion to take place. So this is one of the problems that catastrophists have a real hard time explaining. Another problem with the theory of catastrophism is that it cannot explain certain fossil structures that look like they were formed under normal living conditions. These are called in situ growth structures. Now this is kind of a confusing discussion here, and I actually went out a couple years ago on internet trying to find more information, and there wasn't a whole lot out there. But Dr. Weil says in the book that these structures have the appearance of being formed slowly over time by creatures that were living in the sediments as the sediments were being deposited. So this is pretty hard to understand how this could happen, especially if all these layers were laid down during a worldwide flood, of how those structures could have been formed by these creatures living in the sediments as the sediments were being deposited. A third problem with catastrophism is that theory cannot explain the enormous chalk deposits that we find. It can't be explained in terms of the worldwide flood. Dr. Weil says, it's very hard to see how all the microscopic organisms needed to produce these chalk structures, like the White Cliffs of Dover, how all of them could have been around and living and killed all at that time by the flood. It's just hard to see how there could be enough of these things to create these chalk structures like the White Cliffs of Dover. So these are some of the problems with catastrophism. Now, don't think that, oh, well, there were 6 problems with uniformitarianism and only 3 with catastrophism, therefore catastrophism must be better. No, that is not the way to think about this. Some of the problems here with catastrophism are quite large and make it difficult to understand how that theory could have happened. But what we need to remember as we look at both theories and ask which is better, we need to remember that both have problems and difficulties. And as Dr. Weil said it at the end of Module 7, he said, in the end then, both uniformitarianists and catastrophists must speculate. They must speculate on different things, but they both do it. Neither framework is any more scientific than the other. They both are scientific. Each relies on many assumptions and even more speculation. This is one of the reasons we can't say which one is correct. Since they both involve a large degree of speculation, it's difficult to come up with hard data that clearly rules out one or both of these views. This concludes the lecture of Module 8. I hope it helps you to see the strengths and weaknesses of both of these theories, and that by studying them you will be able to make a good, solid decision on which of these theories you think fits the data best.